Rachel Smith, 29, firmly held the microfiber cloth as she climbed another step of the polished wooden staircase. Her movements were precise, calculated, the result of years of experience in the homes of Beverly Hills elite. Each drop of cleaning product was measured carefully, each surface treated with the care of someone who knew that a mistake could mean the end of her job. "Mom, I'm thirsty," a small, sweet voice whispered from the pantry. Rachel quickly descended, nervously glancing around. Her brown eyes, usually steady and confident, now carried a worry she tried to hide from her 4-year-old daughter. Lily sat on the cold ceramic floor of the pantry, surrounded by bags of flour and cans, drawing on scrap paper she had taken from the office desk. "Shh, my love, speak softly," Rachel murmured, kneeling beside the girl and stroking her curly hair. "Mommy will finish cleaning those shiny windows and then we'll go home, okay?" Lily nodded, hugging her patched-up doll, a gift she had received last Christmas when they still lived in a larger house in East Los Angeles. The girl's eyes, large and expressive like her mother's, sparkled with a patience that shouldn't exist in someone so small. She had learned early to be invisible, to be quiet, to hide when necessary. "Can I have a cookie?" she asked softly, pointing to a bag of cheese puffs on the shelf. "Yes, princess, but just one, okay?" Rachel returned to work with a heavy heart. David Johnson's house was one of the most elegant in the neighborhood, 3 stories of white marble, a garden with century-old jacarandas, and a pool that reflected the blue of the Los Angeles sky. Each room was larger than the 2-bedroom apartment where she and Lily lived in Silver Lake. Working there should have been a blessing, but it had become a nightmare of anxiety since the municipal daycare cancelled Lily's enrollment. The sound of tires on gravel in the driveway made her stop immediately. Her heart raced. David shouldn't be back before 5 in the afternoon. He always notified her when his schedule changed. She looked at the clock. 2:30. Running to the pantry, she found Lily with heavy eyelids. "Lie down here, my love, and stay very still. Just a quick nap," she whispered, arranging some folded towels to make an improvised bed. "If anyone comes, you pretend to be sleeping, okay?" The girl nodded, curious but obedient. Rachel kissed her forehead and partially closed the pantry door, leaving a crack for air. Her hands trembled as she quickly put away the cleaning products and checked for any traces of her presence in the kitchen. David Johnson was 36, with the demeanor of someone who had never had to ask permission to occupy any space. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with dark hair, always perfectly styled, he wore a seriousness on his face that intimidated even his most experienced associates. He entered through the front door, removing his designer grey blazer, the sound of his Italian shoes echoing through the high-ceilinged foyer. "Mrs. Thompson?" he called, his deep voice reverberating through the halls. "She went to the doctor today, Mr. David." Rachel appeared in the living room, drying her hands on her apron. "She asked me to let you know she'll be back early tomorrow." He looked at her for a few seconds, noticing for the first time how she seemed different from the other employees he had hired. There was something in her eyes, a silent dignity that contrasted with the simplicity of her clothes. Rachel wore a simple white blouse and dark jeans, but maintained an upright posture without excessive submission. "Is everything ready for tomorrow?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Yes, sir. The chandeliers are clean, the marble is polished, and I left dinner prepared in the fridge, as Mrs. Thompson instructed." David nodded and headed to the office. Rachel breathed a sigh of relief, but the feeling didn't last long. She heard his footsteps change direction. He was going to the kitchen. Her blood ran cold when she realized she had forgotten to close the pantry door completely. In the kitchen, David opened the fridge, looking for bottled water. That's when he heard a soft noise, like the whisper of paper being crumpled. He turned slowly and noticed the pantry door ajar. He approached silently and opened it fully. Lily was lying among the towels, fast asleep. Her curly hair framed her serene face angelically. On the floor beside her, carefully spread out, were 3 drawings made with colored pencils. A house with a family of 2 holding hands, a huge yellow sun, and a tree full of colorful flowers. The doll was hugged against her chest, and her small hands still held half of a cheese puff. David stood still for long minutes, observing that scene that contrasted completely with the cold silence that always dominated his house. Something inside him stirred. A strange feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The girl slowly opened her eyes, blinking a few times before focusing on him. Instead of the fear he expected, she smiled. "Hi, mister," she said, with the typical ease of children. "Do you want a piece of my cookie? It's tasty." She extended the other half of the cookie toward him, her eyes shining with genuine generosity. David crouched down to her level. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice coming out softer than he intended. "Lily. And you?" "David. This is my house." "Cool. It's really big, right? My mom?" "You said you have a blue pool. I can swim a little." At that moment, Rachel appeared in the pantry doorway, pale as a sheet. Her legs trembled, and she held onto the wall to avoid falling. She knew this was the end. She would be fired on the spot, with no references or notice. "Mr. David, I can explain," she began, her voice trembling. He slowly stood up, first looking at the girl, then at her. The silence stretched. For seconds that felt like an eternity. Lily, sensing the tension, also stood up and held her mother's hand. "Mommy, the mister is nice. He liked my drawings." David glanced again at the drawings on the floor, then at Rachel's face, which mixed shame, fear, and a fierce determination to protect her daughter. There was something about this situation that reminded him of distant and painful memories from his own childhood in that very house. "Why is she here?" he finally asked, but without the harshness Rachel expected. "The daycare cancelled her enrollment. Issues with documentation. I had no one to leave her with, and I can't lose this job, sir. I promise it won't happen again. I will find a solution." The words tumbled out, laden with contained desperation. David watched as she instinctively placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder, her eyes shining with tears she refused to shed in front of the child. "What is your full name?" he asked the girl. "Lily Smith. I'm 4 years old, and I can already write my name," she replied proudly, unaware of the gravity of the situation. David remained silent for a few more moments, as something inside him made a decision he couldn't fully comprehend. Perhaps it was the memory of his own childhood loneliness in that house, or the way the girl had offered her cheese puff without hesitation, or the silent dignity he saw in Rachel's eyes. "Tomorrow you come back at the usual time," he finally said to Rachel, "and bring her with you." Rachel blinked several times, unable to process what she had heard. "Sir?" "You heard me. But she stays in the service area or the kitchen. She can't roam around the house when I have guests." Lily clapped her hands, excited. "Thank you, Mr. David. Can I call you David?" "David," he corrected, but without harshness. Rachel felt her legs wobble. She didn't know if it was relief, gratitude, or just shock, but the tears she had held back finally began to flow silently. She knelt beside her daughter and hugged her tightly. "What do you say to Mr. David, Lily?" "Thank you so much. Tomorrow I'll bring new drawings for you to see." David nodded briefly and left the kitchen, leaving mother and daughter alone. He climbed to his room with heavy steps, not fully understanding what he had done. That night, for the first time in years, the silence of the mansion did not feel comforting. It felt empty. Rachel carefully organized Lily's drawings, put the rag doll in her bag, and held her daughter's hand as they left. As they walked through the garden toward the gate, she looked back one last time. She didn't know what changes that moment would bring, but she felt that something fundamental had shifted that sunny March afternoon. The scent of blooming hibiscus mingled with the aroma of coffee, still lingering in the mansion's air, creating a sense of possibility that neither of them could yet name. The days that followed that encounter in the pantry brought a strange atmosphere to the mansion in Beverly Hills. Rachel arrived promptly at 7 in the morning, always with Lily by her side, carrying a small pink backpack filled with drawings, colored pencils, and her inseparable rag doll. The girl had dubbed the laundry corner "my office," where she set up her makeshift desk on an upside-down cardboard box. David, in turn, completely changed his routine. A man of rigorously established habits who always left for the office in time BB at 8:15 now appeared in the kitchen at unpredictable times. Sometimes at 9, other times at 10:30, always with some excuse. He had forgotten a document, needed to make an important call, or simply wanted to work from home that morning. "Good morning, Mr. David," Rachel greeted politely and respectfully whenever he appeared. "Good morning," he replied curtly, but his eyes inevitably searched for the small silhouette of the girl focused on her drawings. Mrs. Thompson, the 67-year-old housekeeper who had run that house for over 3 decades, observed everything with a discreet smile at the corners of her lips. A short woman, with grey hair always tied in a neat bun and hands marked by years of dedicated service, she knew David better than anyone else in the world. She had been the one to comfort him during the lonely nights of childhood, who taught him his first words, and who witnessed his transformation from a sensitive boy into an emotionally armored man. "Rachel, dear," Mrs. Thompson said one Thursday morning while they prepared breakfast together, "you made more sweet bread than necessary yesterday. How about leaving a few extra rolls for the little one?" Rachel hesitated. "You don't need to worry about that, Mrs. Thompson. I brought snacks for her." "Nonsense. A growing child needs to eat well." The housekeeper was already wrapping 3 warm rolls in a napkin. "And take advantage of the leftover fig jam, too." It was a subtle game that established itself in the following weeks. Mrs. Thompson forgot washed fruits on the counter, prepared extra smoothies, and there was always a plate of fresh cookies that couldn't go stale. Rachel, initially embarrassed by that generosity, began to accept with silent gratitude. David noticed everything. He noticed how Lily hummed softly while drawing, always songs she had learned at school or from the neighborhood church. He noticed how Rachel worked with an almost obsessive dedication, polishing every surface until it shone, organizing every object with care. He noticed the subtle changes in the house, especially how it began to smell different, no longer just the scent of industrial cleaning products, but something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was the soft perfume Rachel wore, or the aroma of homemade bread that Mrs. Thompson insisted on baking, or simply the presence of life pulsating through the once silent hallways. "Mr. David," Rachel approached him one Friday afternoon as he descended the stairs from the office. She held a white envelope in her hands, slightly trembling. "Could you please sign this statement?" He took the paper and quickly read it. It was a simple employment statement confirming that Rachel Smith was employed as a domestic worker in his residence. "What do you need this for?" "It's for Lily's enrollment process at a new daycare. They require proof of income and employment." David signed without asking further questions, but noticed the relief wash over her face. It was the first time he had seen her truly smile since she started working there, a smile that completely transformed her features, revealing a natural beauty that the days of worry had hidden. "Thank you, sir. The daycare is near the subway station, so it won't interfere with my schedule." "When does she start?" "Next Monday, if everything goes well with the paperwork." That night, David stayed late at the office. but he couldn't concentrate on the financial reports spread across his mahogany desk. Through the window, he saw the city lights twinkling in the distance, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the conversation with Rachel. Why did he feel a strange pang at the thought that Lily wouldn't be there in the coming mornings? The weekend passed slowly. David went to play tennis at the club, had dinner with investors at the upscale restaurant, maintained his usual social routine, but the mansion felt especially empty when he returned on Sunday night. Even the silence felt different, heavier, less welcoming. On Monday, Rachel arrived alone. "Good morning, Mr. David," she greeted as always, but there was a different energy about her, lighter, as if a weight had lifted from her shoulders. "Did the girl start at the daycare?" "Yes, sir. She was so excited. She said she was going to make new drawings to show you." David nodded and headed to the office, but throughout the day he found himself paying attention to the sounds of the house. Without the quiet conversations between mother and daughter, without the soft noise of colored pencils being organized, without the muffled giggles that sometimes escaped from the laundry room, the mansion had returned to its previous state of absolute silence. On Wednesday, something changed again. Rachel arrived holding Lily's hand, her red eyes revealing a night of poor sleep. "The daycare is having electrical issues," she explained to David before he could ask. "They will be closed for a week for repairs." "And then?" "Then she will return, sir. It's just 1 week." But David noticed the hesitation in her voice. He also noticed how Lily was quieter than usual, almost apathetic. Instead of running to her office in the laundry room, she clung to her mother's skirt. "What's wrong, little one? Aren't you going to make drawings today?" Mrs. Thompson asked, kneeling to the girl's level. "The lady at the daycare said that maybe the school will have to close for good," Lily said with a sadness that shouldn't exist in a 4-year-old. "That they don't have money to fix the wires." Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath to compose herself. David saw the silent struggle unfolding on her face, the attempt to maintain composure, to protect her daughter from her own worries. "Don't worry about that right now, my love," Rachel murmured, stroking her daughter's hair. That afternoon, while Rachel polished the furniture in the library, David went upstairs to talk to Mrs. Thompson. He found her in the kitchen, preparing a cornmeal cake whose aroma was already filling the house. "Mrs. Thompson, do you know of any good daycare in the area?" The housekeeper stopped stirring the batter and looked at him with curiosity. "For whom, Mr. David?" "For Rachel's daughter." A slow smile spread across the wrinkled face of the woman. "I do know one. St. Teresa's Daycare in Silver Lake. My niece works there. It's private, but it has quality. Why do you ask?" "Just curiosity." Mrs. Thompson knew him too well to believe that answer, but she said nothing. She continued stirring the cake, softly humming an old tune. On Thursday, the tension in the house was palpable. Rachel worked with mechanical efficiency, but David noticed that she was constantly checking her phone, something she had never done before. Lily played quietly, without her usual joy. It was Mrs. Thompson who brought the news during lunch. "Rachel, dear, could you come here for a moment?" David was in the living room pretending to read a report, but attentive to every word of the conversation coming from the kitchen. "The daycare confirmed the closure," Rachel said in a controlled voice. "Financial problems that go beyond the electrical issues. And now? I will look for other options. Maybe I can get a spot at a municipal daycare in another neighborhood. That could take months, you know." "I know, Mrs. Thompson, but I will find a way." David heard the silence that followed, heavy with unspoken worries. He knew that Rachel earned just above minimum wage, knew that paying for a private daycare would consume almost half of her income, knew that she had no close family in Los Angeles to help. That night, He stayed awake late, pacing the room, looking out the window at the garden illuminated by streetlights. He thought about the childhood he had in that same house, materially privileged but emotionally barren. He thought about how his parents were always traveling, how he had practically been raised by employees, how he learned early on that money did not fill emotional voids. But he also thought about how Lily had transformed the atmosphere of the house in just a few weeks, how her laughter echoed through the hallways, how, carrying a sheet with numbers and letters, Lily exclaimed, "Auntie taught me to write my full name." The letters were shaky, some upside down, but there was genuine pride in her eyes that made David smile, a true smile that Mrs. Thompson hadn't seen in years. "It's very pretty," she said, bending down to be at her level. "Can you write other words?" "I can. Mommy, house, school, and Leo." "Leo? That's your name, right? David is too long to write, so Auntie said I can call you Leo." Rachel appeared in the kitchen at that moment, still wearing rubber gloves. "Lily, don't bother Mr. David, he's working." "I'm not bothering," David said, surprising himself with the ease of his response. There was an awkward moment of silence. Rachel dried her hands on her apron, clearly unsure how to react. It was the first time David openly showed he enjoyed the girl's presence. "Do you want to see my new drawing?" Lily asked, unaware of the adult's tension. "It's of your house, but with more colors." She ran to grab the drawing from her backpack and returned with a sheet depicting the mansion, but with details that didn't exist in reality. Flowers in the windows, a swing in the yard, children playing on the lawn. "Why did you draw children here?" David asked. "Because a big house without children is sad," she replied, with the profound simplicity that only children possess. "The teacher at school said a house needs laughter to be happy." Those words echoed in David's mind all night. A big house without children is sad. He thought about his own childhood in that same mansion, in the silent hallways, at solitary meals, in the constant feeling that something was missing, even with everything money could buy. The next morning, he made an impulsive decision. Instead of heading to the office, he called to cancel his morning meetings and worked. At the kitchen table, when Lily returned from school in the late afternoon, she found him there, surrounded by papers and with his laptop open. "Hi, Leo. Are you working in the kitchen today?" "I am. Sometimes it's good to change the environment." "Can I draw here next to you? I promise I'll be quiet." David looked at Rachel, who was watching the scene with a mix of gratitude and concern. "Sure, but you can't touch my papers." "I promise." For the next hour, a strange peace filled the kitchen. David worked on his reports, Lily drew intently, and Rachel prepared dinner. Occasionally the girl would ask a question. "Leo, what color is this word?" Or, "Leo, how do you draw a cat?" And he answered with a patience he didn't know he possessed. It was Mrs. Thompson who broke the routine, arriving from the pharmacy with medication for her high blood pressure. She stopped at the kitchen door, observing the domestic scene with a satisfied smile. "It's nice to see the kitchen full of life," she commented. "It's been a while since this house had such a family atmosphere." Her words created an awkward moment. David abruptly closed the laptop as if he had been caught doing something inappropriate. "I'll finish this in the office," he murmured, gathering the papers. "Are you leaving already, Leo?" Lily asked, disappointed. "I have work to do." "Okay. Will you come back tomorrow to draw with us?" David hesitated at the door. "Maybe." That night he stayed awake late, pacing back and forth in his room. What was happening to him? Why was the presence of a child and a housekeeper affecting his established routine so much? Why did he miss the laughter that echoed through the house when they weren't there? The next morning, he decided to return to his normal routine. He left early for the office, had lunch with investors, attended meetings. But when he got home at the end of the day, the first thing he did was look for new drawings on the refrigerator. There were two. One was from school, with several children playing in the playground. The other was of him sitting at the kitchen table with Lily next to him drawing. On the paper, he was smiling. A version of himself he didn't recognize, more relaxed, more human. "Did you like the drawings?" Lily appeared behind him, still in her school uniform. "They're nice, but I think you drew me much better than I actually am." "No, you are handsome, especially when you smile." David crouched down to her level. "And when do I smile?" "When you're with us in the kitchen, or when you talk to me about the drawings, or when you eat Mrs. Thompson's cake." There was a simple truth in those observations that hit him like a punch. A 4-year-old had noticed something he himself didn't see, that there were moments when he felt different, lighter, closer to who he really was beneath the emotional armor. "Lily, come to dinner," Rachel called from the kitchen. "I'm coming, Mummy. Leo, do you want to have dinner with us tonight?" The question came out so naturally that for a moment David considered accepting. He imagined himself sitting at the kitchen table talking about the day, listening to Lily talk about school, seeing Rachel smile without her usual tension. "No, thank you. I'll have dinner in my room." "Okay. But one day you'll have dinner with us, right? It would be fun." As he climbed the stairs to his room, David carried with him the image that Lily had painted of him, smiling, relaxed, human. And for the first time in years, he wondered if that version of him could really exist, or if it was just the colorful fantasy of a child who saw the world with eyes still untainted by reality. That night, the silence of the mansion felt heavier than ever. And when he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of laughter echoing through the hallways and colorful drawings scattered across the white walls of his house. Autumn arrived in Los Angeles with its usual melancholy, bringing cooler mornings and afternoons that darkened earlier. In the mansion in Beverly Hills, the changes. David had developed the habit of having his morning coffee in the kitchen, justifying that he needed to catch up on economic news on his tablet while eating. The truth was that those moments with Lily chattering about school and Rachel discreetly preparing coffee had become the most anticipated part of his day. "David, did you know there are little birds that make nests in people's hair?" Lily asked one Tuesday morning, chewing on a piece of toast with strawberry jam. "What do you mean?" David put down the tablet, genuinely curious. "The teacher told us there are tiny birds that make nests in the hair of some people who live in the forest. They never cut their hair." Rachel smiled as she washed the dishes. She had noticed how David had become more present in recent weeks, how his rigid posture relaxed naturally in Lily's presence. Sometimes she caught him watching Lily with an almost paternal expression, which he quickly disguised when he realized he was being observed. "And would you like to have birds in your hair?" David asked, playing along. "I think so, but only the really tiny ones, and they would have to be polite. They couldn't poop in my hair." The answer elicited a genuine laugh from David, a laugh that Mrs. Thompson heard from the pantry, making her smile with satisfaction. It was moments like that that made her feel that her years of dedication to that house were finally bearing fruit. "Lily, let's get ready for school," Rachel gently intervened. "Mr. David needs to work." "Oh, there's no need to rush," he said, checking the clock. "I still have a few minutes." It was then that his phone rang. The name that appeared on the screen made his expression change instantly. Clara Mendonça, his ex-wife. He hesitated for a few seconds before answering. "Hello? David, darling, how are you?" Clara's voice was sweet as honey, with that calculatedly seductive tone he knew well. "I just got back from Paris, and I've been missing you so much." David abruptly stood up from the table, walking to the entryway. "Clara, I didn't expect you to call." "Why wouldn't I call? We're civilized people, aren't we? Besides, I have an interesting proposal for you." In the kitchen, Rachel tried not to listen to the conversation, but it was impossible to ignore the tension that had taken over David. Lily, sensitive like all children, noticed the change in the atmosphere. "Mommy, did Leo get sad?" "He's working, my love. Let's leave him alone." David returned to the kitchen a few minutes later, but the lightness of the moment had completely vanished. His posture was once again rigid, his face closed in an impenetrable expression. "I need to leave early today," he said curtly, grabbing the car keys. "Mrs. Thompson, cancel my lunch with the construction team." Lily waved at him from the window as he drove down Augusta Street towards downtown. But David didn't see. His mind was completely consumed by memories he preferred to keep buried. Clara Mendonça had been his wife for 3 years, a marriage that started as a strategic union between influential families and ended in a bitter divorce. A woman of refined beauty and unbridled ambitions, she'd made it clear that David's money was more interesting than his person. When business went through a rough patch 2 years ago, she simply disappeared, taking with her a considerable sum and some business secrets that almost cost him a lawsuit. Now, she was back, and David knew that meant trouble. They met at the Beverly Hills Hotel, one of the most elegant restaurants in the city. Clara arrived promptly, stunning in a designer black dress and red designer shoes. Her perfume, expensive designer, announced her presence even before she appeared. "You look great," she said, lightly kissing his cheek. "Single life is treating you well." David remained cold. "What do you want, Clara?" "Straight to the point, as always. That's one of the things I appreciated about you." She sat gracefully, crossing her legs in a calculatedly seductive manner. "I heard your business is doing very well. The development company has grown considerably. And I'm back in the US for good. Paris was wonderful, but you know how it is. The heart always pulls you home." She paused dramatically. "I've been thinking about us, David, about how good we were together when things were working. We were never good together, Clara. You were interested in my money. I was interested in maintaining social appearances. When the money dwindled, you disappeared." Clara laughed, a crystalline sound that used to charm men. "You're being unfair. I was young, immature. People change, evolve. Some people." Throughout the conversation, David found himself comparing Clara to Rachel. Artificial elegance versus natural dignity, calculated words versus simple sincerity, expensive perfume versus the soft scent of lavender, subtle manipulation versus direct honesty. "David, I'm serious." Clara leaned forward, lightly touching his hand. "I miss us. I miss that house, that garden. Remember how we used to drink sparkling wine on the porch on Sundays?" He remembered. He also remembered how those moments felt like performances, as if they were both playing roles in a play about marital happiness. "What exactly do you want, Clara?" "A chance. To talk, to get to know each other again. No pressure, no commitments, just exploring possibilities." David remained silent for long minutes. Part of him, the rational business part, knew Clara was toxic, that her presence would bring complications. But another part, the part that had felt rejected and humiliated by the divorce, felt a strange satisfaction at seeing her return, seemingly regretful. "All right," he finally said. "We can talk, but I promise nothing." Clara smiled with satisfaction. "That's all I want. By the way, can I stop by the house tomorrow? I'd like to see how the garden is doing." When David arrived home at the end. In the afternoon, the usual routine was unfolding in the kitchen. Lily was drawing intently while Rachel finished preparing dinner. The contrast with the artificial environment of the restaurant was striking. "Hey, David, I made a new drawing for you." Lily ran to him carrying a colorful sheet of paper. "It's you driving your nice car." David looked at the drawing. Simple lines, but filled with affection, showing a smiling figure behind the wheel of a blue car. In the passenger seat, there was a small figure with red bows. "Who's that next to you?" "It's me. I imagined what it would be like if you took me for a ride in your car. It would be fun, right?" There was an innocence in those words that completely contrasted with the calculated sophistication of Clara. David felt a strange pang in his chest, something he couldn't identify as tenderness or guilt. "Lily, don't bother Mr. David," Rachel intervened, as always. "He just got home from work." "I'm not bothering," David said automatically, but his voice sounded different, more distant, more formal. Rachel noticed the change immediately. She had worked long enough for different employers to recognize when something was wrong. David seemed tense, as if he were battling something internally. "Mr. David, can I prepare something special for dinner? Mrs. Thompson bought fresh salmon today." "No, thank you. I'm eating out tonight." "Again?" Lily asked, clearly disappointed. "You ate out yesterday too." "I have work commitments," he replied tersely. But that wasn't true. David simply couldn't stay in the house that night. He couldn't handle the confusion of feelings that the conversation with Clara had stirred. He needed time to process what was happening to him, to understand why the prospect of reconnecting with his ex-wife left him feeling both relieved and disturbed. He drove aimlessly through the streets of Los Angeles. He ended up stopping at a bar in Silver Lake, coincidentally the same neighborhood where Rachel lived. He ordered a whiskey and watched the street traffic, pondering how his life had become complicated in ways he couldn't comprehend. When he finally returned home, the mansion was steeped in silence. In the fridge, there was a new drawing from Lily, a family of 3 holding hands, with the word "happy" written in shaky letters at the top of the page. David stood still for long minutes, staring at that simple drawing that summed up everything he had never had, and perhaps never had the courage to seek. The next day, Clara would return to that house, bringing with her the weight of a past he had tried to forget. He went upstairs to his room, carrying the feeling that something important was about to change in his life, and he wasn't sure if it would be for better or worse. Clara arrived the next morning promptly at 10 o'clock, driving a red convertible BMW that contrasted with the sober colors of the mansion. She wore an immaculate white linen suit and Prada sunglasses, exuding the kind of elegance that cost more than the annual salary of many people. Her intense and striking perfume filled the entry hall as soon as Mrs. Thompson opened the door. "Clara, it's good to see you," the housekeeper politely lied, although her eyes revealed her true opinion of the former employer. "Mrs. Thompson, you haven't changed a bit. Still taking care of this wonderful house with so much love." Clara entered with the familiarity of someone who knew every corner of that place, her heels echoing on the marble floor. "Where is David?" "In the office, ma'am. He's in an important video conference." "No problem, I can wait. How about making that special coffee you used to make for me, with cinnamon and cardamom?" In the kitchen, Rachel was finishing organizing the groceries she had bought at the farmer's market. Lily was at school but had forgotten her favorite doll, so Rachel planned to take it to her during recess. When Clara appeared at the kitchen door, the atmosphere seemed to cool instantly. "And you must be the new maid," Clara said, examining Rachel from head to toe with calculating eyes. "What's your name?" "Rachel Smith," she replied politely, but without servility. "How long have you worked here?" "A few months, ma'am." Clara continued her visual inspection, noticing how Rachel was naturally beautiful, even in simple clothes and without makeup. There was something in her posture, a silent dignity, that deeply unsettled her. "David has always had good taste in employees," she commented with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you're taking good care of the house. He's very particular about cleanliness and organization." "I do my job to the best of my ability," Rachel replied calmly. "I'm sure. Do you have family, children?" The question seemed innocent, but there was something in the tone that alerted Rachel. "I have a daughter. How old? 4 years old. How lovely. Children are so energetic. I hope that doesn't interfere with your work here. David values peace at home." Mrs. Thompson, who had witnessed the entire conversation while preparing the coffee, intervened. "Little Lily is an angel. She brings joy to this house." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Does the child come to work with her mother?" "Sometimes," Mrs. Thompson replied defensively. "Mr. David doesn't mind." "Interesting," Clara murmured. "David always said he didn't like children around during work. People change, right?" At that moment, David appeared in the kitchen, wearing a light blue dress shirt that accentuated his dark eyes. There was something forced in his smile when he saw Clara. "Sorry for the delay. The meeting ran longer than expected." "No problem, dear. I was getting to know your new employee better. She seems very dedicated." Rachel felt the tension in the air and discreetly excused herself. "Excuse me, I need to take something to my daughter at school." As she left, Clara moved closer to David, lightly touching his arm. "She's pretty and young. Should I be worried?" "Don't be ridiculous, Clara. She's my employee." "Of course," she replied with an enigmatic smile. "How about you show me how? Is the garden still there? I miss those rose bushes so much." They walked through the garden while Sarah reminisced about past episodes, always subtly touching his arm, always laughing in a calculatedly seductive way. David found himself comparing that behavior to the simple naturalness of Rachel, but he pushed those thoughts away. "You know, David, I've been thinking a lot about us over these 2 years, Sarah said, stopping near the central fountain of the garden. "About the mistakes I made, about how I wasted something special." "Sarah, let me finish." She positioned herself in front of him, her blue eyes shining with tears that seemed genuine. "I know I hurt you. I know I was selfish and immature. But Paris taught me a lot about myself, about what really matters in life." David remained silent, part of him wanting to believe those words, another part remembering the pain she had caused. "I'm not asking for us to go back to how we were before," she continued. "I'm asking for a chance to build something new, something better. We are different people now." When Rachel returned from school an hour later, she found Sarah settled in the main room, as if she had never left. She had changed into a black midi dress that accentuated her elegant silhouette and was flipping through a home decor magazine while sipping tea from one of the fine china teacups. "Oh, you're back," Sarah said without looking up from the magazine. "David went to take care of some things at the office. He said I could make myself comfortable." Rachel nodded politely and headed to the kitchen to continue her work, but Sarah followed her. "Rachel, can I ask you a personal question? As a mother, well, as a woman to woman." "Of course, Mom." "Don't you think it's dangerous to mix work with personal life? I mean, bringing your child to your boss's house. It can create inappropriate expectations, both from her side and yours." The words were spoken with a sweet smile, but Rachel felt the poison behind them. "I don't understand what you mean." "Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing. It's just that David is a lonely man, vulnerable in a way, and you are a beautiful woman in a delicate financial situation. Sometimes these situations can create emotional confusion." Rachel felt her face burn, but she maintained her composure. "My relationship with Mr. David is strictly professional." "I'm sure it is," Sarah replied, but her tone suggested exactly the opposite. "It's just that I've known him for many years. I know how he can be kind when he cares for someone, and sometimes that's misinterpreted." "Ma'am, I need to get back to work." Of course. I was just trying to be helpful. Women need to help each other, right?" That afternoon, when Lily returned from school, the atmosphere in the house was completely different. Sarah was still there, now settled in the library with David, laughing loudly at some private joke. The sound of that laughter echoed through the halls, creating a sense of intrusion that Lily immediately felt. "Mom, who is that woman?" she whispered, discreetly pointing to the library. "She's an acquaintance of Mr. David," Rachel replied, trying to keep neutrality in her voice. "Is she going to live here?" "I don't know. My love, it's not our concern." But Lily, with the keen intuition of children, sensed that something was wrong. The house no longer had that warm aroma it always did. It was dominated by the strong and artificial perfume of that stranger. Even Mrs. Thompson seemed different, more tense, as if she were walking on eggshells. By the end of the afternoon, Sarah finally said her goodbyes, but not before making one more seemingly innocent comment. "David, it's great that you keep the house so well organized, although don't you think it's a bit different, more homey than before?" She looked meaningfully at a drawing by Lily that was pinned to the refrigerator. "Children make everything more colorful, don't they? I hope that's not interfering with your work or your peace." After she left, David walked around the house like a caged animal. There was something in Sarah's words that deeply unsettled him, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. She had planted seeds of doubt that were now germinating in his mind. Rachel noticed his change in mood immediately. He was distant, formal, like in the early days when she worked there. When Lily tried to show him a new drawing, he barely glanced at it. "Not now, Lily, I'm busy." The girl was confused by the sudden coldness, but Rachel took her to play in the garden, away from the tension that had taken over the house. That night, Sarah called David. "Thank you for today, dear. It was wonderful to be home again." "Sarah, that is no longer your home." I know, but you understand what I meant." A calculated pause. "David, can I give you some advice? As someone who knows you well." "What?" "Be careful with the influences you allow into your life. Sometimes, out of kindness, we end up creating complicated situations, and you've always been very generous with less fortunate people." "What are you talking about?" "About your housekeeper and her child. Don't get me wrong. She seems like a good person. But do you notice how she looks at you, how the child behaves around you? They are forming bonds that could be problematic." David fell silent, but Sarah's words echoed in his mind like a virus. "I'm just worried about you, dear. You've always been very protective of your privacy, and now there's a child running around the house, a woman who knows all your habits. It's a lot of intimacy for people who are basically strangers." When he hung up the phone, David found himself questioning everything he had felt in the past weeks. Lily's laughter, the tranquility he felt in Rachel's presence, the sense that this house finally had life. Was all of that real, or just an illusion created by his own loneliness? Sarah had done her job. The seeds of doubt were planted, and David couldn't shake them off. Adapter Sois, Clara, Claire, Yardim Europa, Beverly Hills, Donna Teresa, Mrs. Thompson, moço, Mr. Mamãe, Monsenhor, Mr. Empregada, Housekeeper Criança, Child, Mulher, Woman, Leonardo, David, Bianca, Lily, Renata, Rachel, Capão Redondo, East Los Angeles, Santa Teresa, Santa Teresa, Escola, School, Casa, House, Jardim, Garden. Tá gostoso. It's tasty. As Rachel looked at Lily without questioning the true intentions behind those smiles, the poison of the past had contaminated the present, and things would never be the same. In the 2 weeks that followed Sarah's visit, the mansion in Beverly Hills seemed to have gone back in time. David resumed his previous routine: hurried morning coffee, early departures, late arrivals. The spontaneous conversations with Lily abruptly ceased, replaced by polite but distant greetings. Rachel felt the change like a silent stab, but she maintained her dignity, taking care of the house with the same perfection as always. "Mom, why doesn't Leo talk to me anymore? Lily asked on a rainy May afternoon while drawing alone at the kitchen table. Her drawings had lost their vibrant colors, now dominated by shades of gray and dark blue. "He's busy with work, sweetheart," Rachel replied, but her own voice sounded less convincing each day. Mrs. Thompson watched everything with a heavy heart. She had seen David grow up in that house, knew each of his emotional wounds, and could recognize when he was building walls to protect himself. She also knew that Sarah had come back to do exactly what she intended, to destroy any possibility of genuine happiness he might find. The situation reached a breaking point on a Friday afternoon. Sarah had become a constant presence in the house, always with some excuse. She wanted to see how the garden was doing, needed to pick up some things she had forgotten, or simply was passing by and decided to drop in. That day, she arrived carrying expensive shopping bags and a bouquet of white orchids. "David, darling," she called from the entrance hall, her voice echoing through the house. "I brought some things to brighten up the house, and those orchids you always liked." Rachel was vacuuming the living room when Sarah entered like a perfumed hurricane. The ex-wife stopped abruptly upon seeing the housekeeper working, and a calculated smile formed on her lips. "Rachel, what a coincidence. Just the person I wanted to see. How can I help you, ma'am?" Sarah closed the living room door, creating an atmosphere of forced intimacy. "Please, have a seat. I would like to talk to you. I prefer to keep working if you don't mind. I insist. It's important." There was something in Sarah's tone that alerted all of Rachel's instincts, but she turned off the vacuum and stood tall, maintaining her dignity. "Rachel, I'll be direct with you because I believe in honesty between women." Sarah sat in the leather armchair, crossing her legs elegantly. "David and I are rekindling our relationship." The words hit Rachel like a punch in the stomach, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm happy for you." "I'm sure you are. You're a sensible person." Sarah paused dramatically. "What brings me here is a delicate matter. David is very generous, sometimes even naive. He may have given you some wrong impressions about your position in this house." "I don't understand what you mean." "Oh dear, let's not pretend. I saw how he looks at you, how he behaves with your child. It's understandable that you might have developed expectations." Rachel felt her cheeks burn, but her voice came out firm. "My relationship with Mr. David is strictly professional. It always has been. Of course it is. But you are an intelligent woman. You must understand the delicacy of the situation. A young and beautiful housekeeper, a single and lonely boss. These arrangements rarely end well for the employee." Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking at the garden where David had just arrived. "I'm going to marry him again, Rachel. Probably by the end of the year. And when that happens, I need you to understand that certain liberties he may have allowed will no longer be appropriate." "What kind of liberties?" "Bringing your child to work, for example, or this excessively familiar atmosphere that has developed here. David has a soft heart, but I need to think about the future of our family, and that includes keeping work relationships within appropriate limits." Rachel felt something break inside her. It wasn't love for David, at least not something she allowed herself to name. It was the death of a fantasy she hadn't even realized she had created. The fantasy that maybe, just maybe, there was a place in the world where she and Lily were more than just tolerated employees. "I understand perfectly, ma'am. You want me to resign?" Sarah smiled with barely concealed satisfaction. "No, dear. You are an excellent professional. I just want things to go back to how they should be. Professional, distant, appropriate." At that moment, David entered the room, visibly surprised to find the two women talking. "Sarah, I didn't know you had arrived." "I just got here, darling. I was talking to Rachel about domestic matters." She approached him with familiarity, adjusting his tie. "You look tired. How about we go out for dinner tonight? I know a new restaurant in the gardens." David hesitated, looking at Rachel, who was avoiding his gaze. "Maybe another day. I have work to finish." "Oh, don't be such a workaholic. You need to relax." Sarah laughed, that crystal sound beginning to irritate even him. "Besides, we have a lot to talk about the future, about our plans." It was at that moment that Lily came running into the room from the kitchen. She stopped abruptly upon seeing the three adults, sensing the tension in the air. "Sorry, Mum. I just wanted to show my drawing to Leo." Sarah looked at the girl with an expression that mixed discomfort and barely concealed disdain. What a spontaneous child. Lily held up a sheet where she had drawn a family, but this time it was just her and her mom, holding hands under a sun that seemed to be hiding behind dark clouds. "Lily, don't bother Mr. David," Rachel said quickly, but her voice trembled slightly. "She's not bothering me," David said automatically, but without the previous warmth. "Of course she is," Sarah intervened with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A child should play in the yard, not run around the house of adults. Isn't that right, Rachel?" The tone was soft, but there was a veiled threat that everyone in the room picked up on. Lily looked confused from one adult to another, not understanding why the atmosphere was so tense. "Come, my love." Rachel extended her hand to her daughter. "Let's let Mr. David work." As mother and daughter left the room, Sarah approached David again. "You see, this is exactly what I was talking about yesterday. This excessive intimacy isn't healthy. The girl is getting used to being treated as if she were family." David remained silent, but there was something in his gaze that Sarah couldn't decipher. "David, are you listening to me? I'm trying to help you maintain an organized house with clear boundaries." "Yes, I heard." "And?" He sighed deeply. "And you're right. I need to keep more professional distance." Sarah smiled triumphantly, but David did not reciprocate. There was something in his eyes, a coldness she didn't recognize, that made her slightly uncomfortable. That night, after Sarah left, David found himself alone in the library, sipping whiskey and staring out at the dark garden. Mrs. Thompson appeared in the doorway, carrying a cup of tea. "I thought you might want something warm before bed." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson." She hesitated at the door. "Mr. David, may I make an observation?" "Of course." "Miss Sarah hasn't changed at all. She's still the same person who nearly destroyed you 2 years ago." David looked at her in surprise. Mrs. Thompson rarely allowed herself such direct comments about his personal life. "And Rachel and little Lily have brought life to this house. They've brought genuine joy. It would be a shame to lose that over misplaced pride." Mrs. Thompson left before he could respond, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Through the window, he could see the lights of the apartment where Rachel and Lily lived, a few streets away. He imagined them having dinner together, talking about their day, creating simple yet true memories. He finished the whiskey in one gulp, feeling the liquid burn his throat. He knew Mrs. Thompson was right. He knew Sarah was toxic. He knew he was making the same mistake as in the past. But there was something inside him. Fear, pride, or simply the inability to believe he deserved something genuine that prevented him from making the right decision. That early morning, 3 people stayed awake in the darkness of Los Angeles. Sarah, in her apartment in Midtown, planning her next move to consolidate her victory. David, in his silent mansion, battling demons he knew all too well. And Rachel, in her simple apartment, holding her sleeping daughter, already making the hardest decision of her life. The masks had fallen. Now it was time to choose who they really wanted to be. Monday arrived charged with a tension that felt like electricity in the air of the mansion. Rachel had spent the weekend agonizing over a decision she knew was inevitable, yet still felt impossible to make. She looked at herself in the mirror before leaving for work, noticing the dark circles that revealed her sleepless nights, and whispered to herself, "Today. It has to be today." Lily was strangely quiet during breakfast. In recent days, the girl had noticed the subtle changes in her mother's behavior, the forced smiles, the prolonged silences, the way she avoided looking in the direction of the office when David was there. "Mom, are you sad?" she asked, stirring her chocolate milk with little interest. "No, my love. Why do you ask? You don't sing any more when you're working, and you don't smile like before." Rachel felt her heart tighten. It was remarkable how children could pick up on the emotional nuances that adults tried to hide. "Mom is just a little tired, princess. Nothing that a good sleep can't fix." David entered the kitchen at that moment, dressed in a dark grey suit that made him seem even more distant and formal. He greeted the two with a brief nod, poured himself some coffee, and headed to the office without a word, a routine that had established itself since Sarah's return. "Does Leo not like us anymore?" Lily whispered, her big eyes filled with confusion. "It's not that, my love. He's just busy with adult things." But Rachel knew she was lying. There was something in David's eyes in those past weeks, a coldness that hadn't existed before, a calculated distance that hurt more than she wanted to admit. Around 10 o'clock, Sarah appeared again. This time she arrived with even more pomp, driving a new silver luxury sedan and wearing a beige tailored suit that cost more than Rachel's annual salary. She brought with her not only her dominating presence, but also a designer, a stylish blonde woman carrying a folder full of fabric and wallpaper samples. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," Sarah chirped through the hall. "I brought Marina to take a look at some changes in the decor. It's time to modernize this house, don't you think?" Mrs. Thompson murmured a polite response, but her eyes revealed exactly what she thought about those modernizations. She had known David long enough to know that he valued the tradition and sobriety of that house, characteristics that Sarah had always scorned. "And where is our host?" Sarah asked, removing her sunglasses with a studied, graceful gesture. "In the office, Mom. He's in an important video conference." "Perfect. That gives us time to start the work. Marina, darling, shall we begin with the main room?" The two women settled in the living room like a whirlwind of fabrics, catalogues, and animated conversations about European trends and contemporary sophistication. Sarah spoke loudly on purpose, ensuring her voice reached the office where David was working. Rachel continued her chores, but it was impossible to ignore the comments that Sarah made sure she heard. "Marina, don't you think this house is a bit too domestic? It lacks elegance, don't you think? It seems to have lost its sophisticated personality." "Maybe. Let's completely change the color scheme of the kitchen. Too homey for my taste. And that wall over there, filled with children's drawings. We definitely need a more adult solution for the decor." Each comment was a pointed jab, a subtle way to erase any trace of Rachel and Lily's presence in that house. It was psychological warfare disguised as decorative renovation. The last straw came at lunchtime. Lily had returned from school excited because she had learned a new song and insisted on singing it for Mrs. Thompson in the kitchen. It was a simple song about friendship, which she sang with the characteristic purity of children. "A friend is someone who stays when everything goes wrong. A true friend is love like no other." Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway just then, interrupting Lily's performance. "What is all this noise?" she asked with a smile that didn't hide her irritation. "Marina and I are trying to work, and this children's entertainment is distracting us." Lily immediately stopped singing, her little face closing in an expression of shame and confusion. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Rachel hurried to say. "Lily, come here, my love. Let's play outside." "No, no." Sarah raised her hand with false magnanimity. "I don't want to seem mean. It's just that we're working on something very important for David, and we need an appropriate environment for adults." At that moment, David appeared in the kitchen, drawn by the voices. He saw Lily with tear-filled eyes, Rachel visibly embarrassed, Sarah with her artificial smile of superiority, and Mrs. Thompson with an expression of contained indignation. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Nothing much, dear," Sarah replied quickly. "We were just adjusting a few household organization issues." David looked at Lily, who was firmly holding her mother's hand. "What were you singing?" he asked, his voice softer. "A song about friends," she replied quietly, still hurt. "Sing it for me." Sarah looked at him in surprise and a twinge of irritation. "David, dear, we don't have time for—" "Sing it for me," he repeated, kneeling down to Lily's level. With a courage that only children possess, Lily began to sing again, her small but firm voice echoing through the kitchen. As she sang, her eyes lit up again, and a shy smile returned to her face. When she finished, David remained silent for long seconds. There was something in that simple song, in that innocent voice, in that moment of genuine purity that completely contrasted with the artificial atmosphere that had taken over his house. "Very beautiful," he finally said, smoothing the girl's curly hair. Sarah watched the scene with growing discomfort. There was something in David's gaze, a tenderness that she couldn't manipulate or control, that alerted her to the danger. "David, Marina is waiting for your opinions on the library project," she quickly intervened. "And we need to resolve the curtain issue before she leaves." He slowly stood up, but his eyes remained on Lily. "Of course, let's take care of that." As the two left the kitchen, Mrs. Thompson approached Rachel. "My dear, you need to make a decision." "I know, Mrs. Thompson, I know. That woman won't stop until she gets what she wants, and what she wants is to eliminate any trace of genuine happiness from this house." Rachel nodded, feeling tears burning in her eyes. "I've made my decision." That afternoon, while Sarah and the decorator transformed the house into a magazine showcase, Rachel finished all her chores with her usual perfection, every surface polished, every object in its place, every corner impeccable. It was her way of saying goodbye, leaving everything perfect one last time. At 5 o'clock, after Sarah finally left with her samples and designs, Rachel knocked on David's office door. "Come in," he said without looking up from the papers. "Mr. David, I need to speak with you." Something in her tone made him look up. Rachel was standing in the doorway, with an upright posture but trembling hands, holding a white envelope. "Sit down." "I'd rather stand." She took a deep breath. "Mr. David, I am resigning." The words echoed through the office like a gunshot. David stood completely still, as if he hadn't processed what he had just heard. "What?" "I'm resigning. I will fulfill the notice period if you want, or I can leave today." "Why?" Rachel hesitated. There were 1,000 things she wanted to say, about how humiliated she felt, about how painful it was to see her daughter treated as an inconvenience, about how Sarah's presence had poisoned the only home where she had ever felt truly respected. But she simply said, "Personal reasons." David stood up, walking to the window. "Does it have to do with Sarah?" "In part." "Did she say something to you?" Rachel remained silent. She didn't want to create problems between them. She didn't want to be seen as a housekeeper stirring up trouble. "Rachel, I'm asking if she said anything." "Mrs. Sarah made it clear that my daughter and I were crossing some boundaries, that our presence was becoming inappropriate for the environment you want to build together." David closed his eyes, feeling a mix of anger and something he couldn't name. "And do you believe that?" I believe she is right about the boundaries, sir, about keeping professional relationships in their proper places. He turned to face her. And if I say I don't want your resignation? Rachel looked him directly in the eyes for the first time in weeks. I would say you need to decide what kind of life you want to have, Mr. David. And I need to protect my daughter from situations she cannot understand. Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything that was left unsaid. Finally, David returned to his desk. How much time do you need? A week, to find someone else and teach them the details of the house. All right. Rachel left the envelope on the desk, her formal resignation letter, and headed for the door. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. Mr. David. Yes? You are a good person. Don't let anyone. After she left, David Johnson found himself alone in the office, staring at the envelope she had left behind. Through the window he could see Lily playing in the garden, softly singing the song she had learned at school. For a moment he allowed himself to imagine how things might be different. What if he sent Sarah away for good? What if he asked Rachel to stay? What if he allowed that house to continue being filled with genuine laughter and true affection? But the fear of being disappointed again, fear of trusting, fear of being vulnerable, was stronger than his courage. He tucked the envelope away in the drawer without opening it, and for the first time in weeks, the mansion returned to its familiar silence, a silence that now felt not comforting but devastatingly empty. Rachel's last week in the mansion passed like a movie in slow motion. Each day carried the weight of the impending farewell. Every routine gesture took on the air of a farewell ritual. She trained Mary, a 50-year-old woman recommended by the housekeeping agency, with the meticulousness of someone who wanted to ensure that the house would continue to receive proper care. Mr. Johnson likes his coffee strong, but without sugar, Rachel explained, while showing her the kitchen cabinets. And these fine china teacups here are his favorites. Mrs. Thompson always insists on using fine china for breakfast. Mary jotted everything down in a notebook, impressed by the level of detail Rachel knew about the household's habits. And the cleaning of the chandeliers, is there a specific product? Yes, this mixture here. But be careful, use only this microfiber cloth. Mr. Johnson is very particular about the shine of the crystal. Lily watched everything with a sadness that broke her heart. The little girl didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew something important was coming to an end. Her drawings that week were all in dark tones, depicting empty houses and lonely people. David avoided staying at home during the day. He left early and returned late, as if Rachel's presence preparing to leave was too painful to witness. Sarah, on the other hand, appeared daily, always with new renovation plans and a barely concealed triumphant energy. "David, dear, we need to decide on the wallpaper for the master bedroom," she said one Thursday, spreading samples across the kitchen table, just as Rachel finished teaching Mary how to prepare the afternoon snack. Rachel discreetly gathered her materials, but Sarah continued, "And that room being used as a playroom. I was thinking of turning it into a closet for myself. What do you think?" A playroom was the little corner in the laundry room where Lily had spent so many afternoons drawing and playing. David looked at the girl, who pretended to be focused on her drawing, but was clearly listening to every word. "We'll discuss this later," he murmured. "Why later? It's just organizational details." Sarah smiled with false innocence. "After all, with the changes happening, we need to optimize the spaces." That night, Mrs. Thompson could no longer contain herself. She found David alone in the library, drinking whiskey and gazing out at the dark garden. "Mr. Johnson, I need to speak with you." "Mrs. Thompson, if this is about Rachel—" "It is indeed about Rachel, and about little Lily, and mainly about you. The housekeeper's voice trembled with contained emotion. "I raised you, David. I watched you grow from a lonely boy into a successful man, but always carrying pains you shouldn't have to bear." David sighed. "Mrs. Thompson, let me finish." For the first time in 30 years, she used a firm tone with him. "I have seen you genuinely smile these past few weeks. I have seen this house come to life. I have seen you discover what it means to have a real family. And now you're throwing it all away because of a woman who has only brought suffering into your life. Sarah has changed. People change. Sarah hasn't changed one bit." Mrs. Thompson stepped closer to him, her eyes shining with indignation. "She is doing exactly what she did the first time, manipulating, controlling, destroying everything genuine around her. The difference is that this time you have something real to lose." David finished his whiskey in one gulp. "And what do I have to lose? A woman who respects you for who you are, not for what you have. A child who sees you as a hero, not as a bank. A chance to be truly happy, not just to maintain appearances." He remained silent for long minutes. "Maybe I don't deserve this, Mrs. Thompson. Maybe Sarah is exactly the kind of person I deserve." "Mr. Johnson," her voice filled with deep sadness, "if your parents could see the man you have become, if they could see how you are wasting your chance to have what they never managed to give you." "My parents never cared about me, you know that." "I know they were complicated, people with their own problems. But I also know you have always been loved in this house, by me, by the other staff who cared for you." She paused. "And now you are being loved by people who chose to be here, not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection." On Friday morning, the eve of Rachel's last day, something unexpected happened. Sarah arrived earlier than usual, carrying a folder full of documents and with an expression of urgency that David did not recognize. "Dear, we need to talk. It's about business." They locked themselves in the office for almost 2 hours. Rachel could hear the tone of the conversation. It started lively on Sarah's part, but gradually became more tense, punctuated by long silences and muffled words. At 11 o'clock, Sarah stormed out of the office like a hurricane, her face a mask of barely contained anger. She stormed through the kitchen, grabbed her bag, and headed for the door. "Sarah!" David called after her. At the top of the stairs, David stood still for several minutes, his expression a mix of relief and what seemed like liberation. "We're not done talking," he said. "Yes, we are." Rachel, completely. The door slammed hard enough to make the chandeliers in the hall tremble. Mrs. Thompson appeared in the kitchen with a discreet smile. "It seems the storm has passed," she murmured to Rachel. "What happened?" "I'm not sure, my dear. But I know that look. It's the same one David had when he finally freed himself from something that was hurting him." That afternoon, David came down to the kitchen for the first time that week. He found Lily drawing at the table, her last afternoon in that house, and Rachel finishing organizing the cleaning supplies for the last time. "Can I see your drawing?" he asked the girl sitting next to her. Lily hesitated, then pushed the paper toward him. It was a drawing of a house very similar to the mansion, but this time there were only 2 figures in front, one large and dark, the other small with red bows. Both had sad expressions. "Where is your mum in the drawing?" "She's gone," Lily said simply, "like we're going to do tomorrow." David felt something tighten in his chest. "And why did you draw me sad?" "Because friends get sad when they separate." The simplicity of her answer hit him like a bolt of lightning. Friends get sad when they separate. A 4-year-old had summed up in one sentence what he had taken weeks to understand. "Lily," he said softly, "what if I tell you that I don't want you to leave?" The girl's eyes lit up. "Really? Really?" Rachel, who had heard the entire conversation, approached the table. "Mr. Johnson, you don't have to—" "Rachel," he interrupted, standing up to look her directly in the eye. Clara brought a proposal today. She wanted me to invest in a ghost company she was involved with. When I refused, she showed who she really is, the same greedy and manipulative person as always. Rachel remained silent, unsure how to react. She told me things about you, about Lily, tried to convince me that you both were a threat, that you were taking advantage of my generosity. He paused. I took too long to realize that the only threat in this house was her. Mr. Johnson, I don't want you to leave, Rachel. I don't want Lily to leave. His voice softened. This house has become a home again with you here. And I was a fool for almost losing that. Lily jumped from her chair and ran to hug his legs. Does that mean I can keep making drawings for you? It means you can make as many drawings as you want, and I will look at all of them. Rachel felt tears streaming down her face. But Mr. Johnson, I already submitted my resignation. And I'm rescinding it, he said with a smile, the first genuine smile in weeks. If you agree to stay. Mrs. Thompson appeared at the kitchen door at that moment, with a smile that seemed to light up her wrinkled face. I think it's time to celebrate, she said. I'll make my special cornmeal cake. That afternoon, for the first time since Clara had returned, the mansion's kitchen was filled with genuine laughter. David helped Lily create a new drawing, this time with 3 smiling figures in front of the house under a bright yellow sun. The scent of lavender competed with the aroma of coffee, the chandeliers reflected vibrant colors from the drawings on the fridge, and the oppressive silence gave way to the most beautiful sound in the world, the sound of a family that had chosen to form, not out of obligation or convenience, but out of genuine love. The storm had passed. Now it was time to rebuild, in a way more solid and true than before. 3 months passed since Clara's definitive departure from the mansion. Autumn gave way to the Los Angeles winter, with its chilly mornings leaving the garden covered in a fine layer of dew and sunny afternoons warming hearts. In the Beverly Hills house, deep changes had occurred, not in the walls or decor, but in the soul of the place. David woke, up earlier now, not out of professional obligation, but for the pleasure of having breakfast with Lily and Rachel. The kitchen table had become the nerve center of the house, where plans were made, stories were told, and life truly happened. Mrs. Thompson watched these transformations with a heart full of gratitude. Her more than 30 years in that house had finally been worth it. Leo, today the teacher said, I'm the best in the class at drawing, Lily announced one Tuesday morning, swinging her legs in the high chair while eating French bread with strawberry jam. Really? And what did you draw? That's so special. A family of bears that lived in a treehouse. Want to see? She opened her backpack and pulled out a colorful sheet with an elaborate drawing for a 5-year-old. She had celebrated her birthday the previous month at a small but memorable party in the mansion's garden with a cake made by Mrs. Thompson and gifts carefully chosen by David. It's beautiful, Princess. You're becoming a professional artist. Rachel smiled as she organized her daughter's lunchbox. In recent months, she had noticed subtle but important changes in David. He laughed more easily, spoke more about feelings, and had developed infinite patience with Lily's endless questions. More importantly, he had started to talk about his own childhood, sharing stories that Mrs. Thompson confirmed with discreet nods. Rachel, he said after Lily went out to brush her teeth, I have a business dinner tonight. Do you two want to join me? It was something that had become routine in recent weeks. David had discovered that he enjoyed having Rachel. With Lily nearby, her presence made him feel more relaxed in social situations. Rachel had resisted at first, but he insisted that they were not. Employer and employee in those moments, they were family. Mr. Johnson, are you sure? It's an important dinner? That's exactly why. You bring me luck." There was truth in those words. Since Sarah had left his life, David's business had flourished in a surprising way, as if the negative energy she brought with her had been an invisible weight on his ability to make good decisions. The dinner was at an upscale restaurant with international investors interested in a new development project. David had reserved a table for 4, making it clear that Rachel was not a hired companion, but someone important in his life. Lily was radiant in her navy blue dress, a gift from David that Rachel had reluctantly accepted. The girl had learned to behave in elegant settings, but retained her natural spontaneity that charmed everyone around. "Mr. Goldman," David greeted the American investor, a 60-year-old man with grey hair and a warm smile. "Allow me to introduce Rachel Smith and her daughter Lily." "A pleasure," Goldman said in slow English, bending down to greet Lily. "What a beautiful girl. How old are you?" "5, she replied proudly. "And you? You look quite old." Rachel was mortified, but Goldman laughed heartily. 62, little one, and you're right, I am quite old." During dinner, Lily won over the entire table with her innocent observations about life. When Goldman mentioned that he had grandchildren her age in the United States, she offered to make a drawing for him to take. "David," Goldman said in English, thinking Lily wouldn't understand, "you have a lovely family. This girl has a special energy." "She's not my biological daughter," David replied honestly, "but she is my family." Rachel felt her heart race at those words. In recent months, the line between employee and something else had become increasingly blurred. David paid for Lily's private school, bought clothes for both of them, and insisted they have dinner together on weekends. But he had never clearly verbalized what that meant. "Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the one we're born into," Goldman wisely observed. That night on the way home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat of the car. David drove in silence, lost in thought, while Rachel watched the urban landscape pass by the window. "Rachel," he finally said, "we need to talk about our situation." Her heart tightened. "If it's about the salary, Mr. Johnson, you don't need to worry. It's not about money." He stopped the car in front of the mansion but didn't get out immediately. "It's about what we are becoming." "I don't understand." David turned to face her. "You do understand, just as much as I do." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Rachel looked at Lily sleeping in the back seat, so small and confident, and felt the weight of responsibility. "Mr. Johnson, we can't." "Why not? Because I'm your housekeeper, because I come from a different world, because—" Her voice faltered. "Because you're scared?" The question hit her like a punch. "I am. Very scared." David nodded understandingly. "I'm scared too, Rachel. Scared of ruining something good. Scared of not being the man you deserve. Scared of repeating the mistakes of the past. Then maybe, he gently interrupted, maybe fear is exactly the proof that it's worth trying." That night they talked late into the night in the kitchen, after Lily had been put to bed in the room that had officially become hers, the former guest room now decorated with her drawings and toys. David shared about his lonely childhood, about the absent parents he had spent years blaming, about how Sarah had taken advantage of his insecurities. Rachel spoke about her violent ex-husband, about the struggle to raise Lily alone, about the fear of not being enough for someone like him. "Do you know the moment I realized I was in love with you?" David asked as the clock approached midnight. Rachel shook her head, her heart racing. "It was when Lily offered me half of her cookie that first day in the pantry. I looked at you and saw how you had taught a 4-year-old to share what little she had. I saw your nobility, your strength, your ability to love without expecting anything in return." Tears streamed down Rachel's face. "David, I don't know if I can be the woman you need." "You already are," he said, holding her hands. "You taught me to be human again. You taught me that a house without love is just an expensive building. You taught me that family is not about blood or money, but about choosing to care for each other every day." They kissed there, in the kitchen, that had become the heart of the house, surrounded by the aroma of coffee and lavender under the soft light illuminating Lily's drawings on the fridge. It was a kiss full of unspoken promises, shared fears, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, two wounded people could heal together. Mrs. Thompson, who had come down for a glass of water, saw them through the slightly open door and smiled. She went back up to her room quietly, whispering a prayer of gratitude. After 30 years of taking care of that house, it had finally become a home. The next morning, Lily woke up to find David and her mom having breakfast together, hands clasped over the table. With the intuition of children, she immediately knew something had changed. "Are you two dating now?" she asked directly, climbing onto her chair. David and Rachel looked at each other, laughing at the simplicity of the question. "What do you think about that?" David asked. "I think you both look prettier when you're happy," she replied. Biting her toast with jam, she said, "And I think our family is now complete." That was exactly what they were, a family that had chosen each other, formed not by accident or convenience, but by genuine love and mutual care. The scars of the past were still there, but now they were merely marks of a journey overcome, not open wounds that bled. Together, they were ready to write a future that none of them had dared to dream alone. A year later, the mansion in Beverly Hills was no longer the same. There were no dramatic structural changes. The walls remained the same cream color, the crystal chandeliers still hung majestically from the ceiling, and the garden maintained its classic elegance. But something fundamental had transformed. The house breathed life. It was a Saturday morning in December, Christmas Eve. The Los Angeles summer had arrived in full force, making the flowers in the garden burst into vibrant colors. Yellow jacaranda trees competed with red hibiscus, while the scent of jasmine mingled with the aroma of coffee that Mrs. Thompson was brewing in the kitchen. "Mom, can I wake Leo?" Lily asked, already dressed in her unicorn pajamas and practically vibrating with excitement. At 6 years old, she had become an even smarter and more talkative child, but she still maintained that natural sweetness that won everyone over. "Let him sleep a little longer, Princess. He worked late last night finishing the year-end reports." "But today is Christmas Eve, and we're going to decorate the tree." Rachel smiled, watching her daughter bounce from one foot to the other. In recent months, life had taken on a routine she never thought possible. David had formalized their relationship, not just romantically, but legally. Rachel was now officially the head of the household, with a salary that left her financially comfortable, and Lily had been included as a dependent on her health insurance plan. "Good morning, family." David appeared in the kitchen with messy hair and a sleepy smile. He wore a simple t-shirt and shorts, a complete transformation from the impeccably dressed executive he used to be. "Leo!" Lily ran to hug him. "You took a long time to wake up. We have so much to do today." "Really? And what do we have to do?" "Decorate the tree, make cookies with Mrs. Thompson, and you promised you would help me wrap Mum's present." David looked at Rachel over Lily's head, exchanging a knowing smile. In recent months, they had developed their own language, made of glances and subtle gestures that required no words. "And where is Mrs. Thompson this morning?" he asked, noticing that the housekeeper was not in her usual spot in the kitchen. "She went to early mass," Rachel explained. "She said she wanted to give thanks for this year being so special." There was deep truth in those words. The year had been transformative for everyone in the house. Mrs. Thompson, at 68, had gained the family she had always dreamed of having. For her, seeing David finally happy was the greatest gift she could receive. During breakfast, David announced, a surprise he had been planning for weeks. "Lily, how about we take a trip during the holidays? A special place." The girl's eyes lit up. "Where to?" "To Disney." Lily's joyful scream echoed throughout the house. It was the kind of dream that seemed impossible for a girl who, 2 years earlier, had been hiding in a pantry sharing cookies. "Really, the real Disney with Mickey and Minnie." "The real Disney," David confirmed, laughing at her reaction. Rachel felt tears burning her eyes. "David, this is too much." "It's exactly what our family deserves," he said, holding her hand. "Lily has never left Los Angeles. It's time for her to see the world." The word "our" echoed in Rachel's heart. In recent months, David had made it clear that he did not see Lily as just his girlfriend's daughter, but as his own daughter in heart. He had started the adoption process, something that made Lily beam with pride when she found out. "Does that mean you're going to be my dad on paper too?" she had asked when David explained about the adoption. "It means I will be your dad in every way," he replied, "if you want." "You? I want? But can I still call you Leo? You can call me whatever you want, princess." Now, preparing for Christmas, they had officially become a family in every sense. The house was filled with traditional preparations, but also with new traditions they were creating together. "David, do you think Santa Claus will really come here?" Lily asked while helping to carry the Christmas decoration boxes into the living room. "I'm absolutely sure." "How do you know?" David knelt down to her level, pretending to conspire. "Because I spoke to him personally. I told him that the most special girl in Los Angeles lives here." Lily laughed, delighted with the performance. "And what else did you say?" "I told him that she is an artist, smart, brave, and has a heart bigger than any gift he could bring." Rachel watched their interaction with her heart overflowing with gratitude. Seeing David, who had once been a closed-off and distrustful man, playing on the floor with her daughter was a miracle that still surprised her every day. "Mom, come help us," Lily called, interrupting her daydreams. The tree decorating became a family event. Mrs. Thompson arrived from church just as they began hanging the golden ornaments and joined the celebration with the enthusiasm of a child. "Mr. Johnson," she said while adjusting an angel on the highest branch, "your parents would be proud to see the man you have become." David paused what he was doing. In recent months, he had made peace with the memory of his parents. He had discovered, through conversations with Mrs. Thompson and some old documents, that they had struggled with personal issues that they couldn't share with a small child. They weren't absent parents by choice, but by their inability to deal with their own wounds. "I think they would love our family," he said, looking at Rachel and Lily. "I'm sure they would," Mrs. Thompson agreed, tears in her eyes. In the afternoon, while Lily took a nap after so much emotion, David and Rachel sat in the garden, watching the city bustle below. "Do you remember how we were a year ago?" Rachel asked, resting her head on his shoulder. "I remember, 2 strangers pretending they didn't feel anything for each other. I was so scared." "Of what?" "That it was temporary, that you would wake up one day and realize you made a mistake." David looked at her tenderly. "And now I know we built something real, something solid." He nodded, kissing the top of her head. "You know what impresses me the most? How Lily adapted to all of this, how she accepts love so naturally. Children are wise that way. They recognize true love when they see it." That night, after the Christmas dinner prepared by Mrs. Thompson, a feast that brought everyone to the kitchen table because that's where they felt most comfortable, David made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I have a special Gift for you three, he said, pulling 3 envelopes from his pocket. Mrs. Thompson opened hers first. It was the deed to a small house in Woodland Hills, near the mansion. Mr. Johnson, what is this? It's your house, Mrs. Thompson, for when you want to retire. But I hope you keep visiting us always. The housekeeper cried like a child, muffling her sobs in her embroidered napkin. Lily opened her envelope and found a drawing made by David, depicting the 3 of them as a family, but with much better features than hers. "You learned to draw," she exclaimed, amazed. "I learned from the best teacher," he said, winking at her. Rachel hesitated before opening her envelope. Inside was a small golden key and a paper with an address. "It's the key to our future," David explained, kneeling before her. "I bought a house in Woodland Hills, near Mrs. Thompson's house. It has a huge garden for Lily to play in, a kitchen where we can continue having breakfast together, and rooms where we can create the memories we never had in childhood." Rachel looked at him, not fully comprehending. "I'm asking you to marry me, Rachel, to be an official, legal, complete family." The silence that followed was broken by Lily clapping her hands. "Does that mean I will have a married mum and dad?" "If your mum says yes," David replied, not taking his eyes off Rachel. Rachel looked around the table, at Mrs. Thompson with tears of joy in her eyes, at Lily radiant with anticipation, at David kneeling with a vulnerability that touched her deeply. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Lily's joyful scream echoed through the house, mixed with Mrs. Thompson's applause and David's laughter. He placed a simple yet elegant ring on Rachel's finger, a band that had belonged to his grandmother, the only family heirloom he truly valued. Later that night, when Lily finally fell asleep, exhausted from so much happiness, David and Rachel were alone in the garden, watching the stars in the clear December sky. "Do you think it will work out?" she asked, still processing everything that had happened. "I think it already has," he replied. "For months. Maybe since that first day in the pantry." "What do you mean?" "Since the day a brave woman chose to trust me with what she had most precious in the world, and since the day a little girl taught me that true love is sharing cookies even when you have little." Rachel smiled, remembering that moment that seemed to have happened in a past life. "And now?" she asked. "Now we will build a life together. We will create happy memories for Lily. We will grow old side by side. We will be the family each of us always dreamed of having." The scent of jasmine intensified with the night breeze, mingling with the familiar aroma of coffee still lingering in the air of the house. It was the same scent that marked their first meeting, but now it carried promises of the future instead of fears of the present. In the kitchen of the mansion, a new drawing was pinned to the refrigerator, made by Lily that afternoon, showing 3 people holding hands in front of a new house under a huge yellow sun. At the bottom, in her still shaky but increasingly firm letters, she had written, "My family forever." And there, under the starry sky of Los Angeles, the story of a family that had chosen each other against all odds officially began, one that had found love where they least expected it, and that proved that sometimes the most beautiful endings are born from the most unlikely beginnings. The new dawn awaiting them would be built on the solid foundation of true love, earned trust, and the certainty that together they could face any storm the future might bring.